Today is July
25th,
2023. That's right. And today we're talking to
Bill Schinsky.
All right. Bill, watch your nose. All right.
Take one.
All right. So, Bill, do I have your permission to do this interview?
Of course you do.
Good. That's a good thing. Bill,
Yes.
tell me about your ancestors.
My ancestors. Gosh. Well, my only interest in ancestors are on my mother's side.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a Mexican land grant family
Mm-hmm.
that's settled in California, which was then Mexico, of course. And they were given a grant from the government of Mexico and Spain. 6,600 acres. There were 3 brothers and another gentleman, Senor Reyes, and they founded Boca Santa Monica. I can never remember the name in Spanish. Anyway, what is now Santa Monica, was their rancho. It was the smallest of the ranchos in California, and it included, what is now Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, I believe some of Malibu, pricey land today, but that's what they did. They settled that. They were ranchers.
What kind of ranching?
Cattle and, just normal things. And
Mm-hmm.
they were there for a while. And then California became a state. And like many other of the, from what I understand from many of the rancho people, it was a cash civilization then, and no one had money because they lived off the land. And no one had cash to pay taxes and things like that. So everyone started selling off their properties. There's still one small piece of the rancho that is left, and that's in the Santa Monica Canyon, and it's the family cemetery. And the name of the family is Marquez, and it's right there. I think it's in Entrada, and surrounded by massive homes, but it's still there, and it has some of my ancestors buried there.
So your maternal side is Marquez,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you use that name sometime in your art.
I do. When I exhibit, I use William Marquez,
Mm-hmm.
because, do you want to know the story behind that?
Yes, I do.
Well, I had a job in Atlanta for the Southern Arts Federation, and my job was to give away money to artists and to arts organizations, museums, which we funded exhibitions and projects. And of course, you give away money, you're a very popular person. And one of the first early times that I ever exhibited anything, people would come up and, "Oh, Bill, this is so fabulous, and we just love it." And my work's never been easy. It's always been
Well,
a
are you
little
talking
bit
about your
challenging.
work or someone else's work?
My work.
Okay.
It's always been a little bit challenging. You kind of have to pay attention to it and think.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when people started telling you how wonderful it was and how they loved it, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, you guys are so full of shit." So then I thought, okay, I want an honest reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I started exhibiting under Marquez. And that's when the honesty came through. I didn't care if they liked it or not, but at least it was honest. That's what's important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the family name has served me well.
Well, how often when do you use that name? Just only
Just when I do art, when I show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now the Schinsky part, how did that happen?
Well, I don't. Schinsky is the derivative of a Polish last name. There was about 35 letters, started with a C and ended with an I, and.
How did that? Did you have Schinsky S starting with an X all your life? I mean, an S.
Yeah, that's what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And they came from, I'm assuming, Poland, and they settled in Detroit, and they were rather unremarkable people.
That was your dad's
Yeah.
side. Okay, so where were you born?
I was born in Santa Monica.
Which one?
St. John's Hospital.
Oh, is that right? And where did you go to school?
I went to school in Westchester,
Mm-hmm.
Westchester, and then we moved to Anaheim.
Okay.
And I continued there until graduated from high school from Anaheim, and then went to Cal State Fullerton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, prior to going to Cal State Fullerton, I was drafted out of college. And
So let's talk about that. Is that okay to talk about?
of course.
That? Okay,
yeah.
what year? Tell me about the draft situation.
Oh, 1966. There was that big buildup, and came home from school one day, and there was a letter. Greetings, signed Uncle London. And,
Uncle London?
Lyndon?
Oh,
Lyndon
Lyndon
Johnson.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, my entire class was drafted out of college.
Really?
I mean, it was a huge buildup in '66, and
And was that college or high school?
college.
Oh, you were going to college and you got the letter.
They stopped student deferments. Yeah, and so that was '66. Went into the Army, and
Did you have a choice of which branch to go in?
if you had enlisted,
Mhm.
otherwise, and I didn't know this at the time, but when this buildup happened, you either went into the Army or some guys were put into the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Was that what? How does
no,
that,
thank you.
was that more?
Well, the Marines were always the first in.
Mm-hmm.
They always caught the hell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So did you? How long after you got the letter did you actually go into the service?
It was a few months when you go into LA for your induction for your physical, and then I was went back for induction and went to basic training.
Where did you go for that?
Fort Bliss, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Most dismal place in the world. Fort Bliss, yeah. Well, all of Texas is dismal, but
you knew you were going to Vietnam, or you didn't?
oh, you had a pretty good idea. Most everyone at that time was going to Vietnam. I mean, if you were lucky, you didn't. Some guys I know remember. You went through basic, you went through AIT, Advanced Infantry Training, which I did at Fort Ord. And some guys were sent to Europe, and some, 1 out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us, we were assigned to different units, and I was assigned to a reconstituted 6th of the 33rd Artillery, Fort Carson, Colorado. And we did some training there, and then went to Vietnam. Got to Vietnam, and
what was that like? You took a plane from where?
we took a boat.
Oh, you took a boat.
Yeah.
What was that like?
The USS Upshur. Well, this relatively small boat with about 5,000 troops on it. It was it was not pleasant. Just the most. Oh.
How long did that take?
Oh, 9 days maybe.
Did you know what you were going to be facing at all?
I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
No one knew.
Mm-hmm.
Not one person in my unit, from the commanding officer down, had ever been in a combat situation. So yeah, I mean, everyone knew. It was like out of a movie. When we got to Vietnam, we landed. We sailed into Da Nang Harbor, and the harbor was too full for us to debark. So we kind of stayed there in the harbor. But no one did if indeed they did research, they never told us about it. But we're surrounded in Da Nang Harbor. There's these little islands, and as we're sitting there on this boat, these jets are coming in, and around us are all these munitions going off. Unexpended. We at the time didn't know this, but they were unexpended bombs, and we thought, oh Jesus Christ, we're in the middle of it. Well, we really weren't in the middle of it, because it was the Air Force, the pilots, the fighters coming back in, and the rounds they had not expended, they dropped on these islands. So they didn't have to land with unexpended rounds. So I think we were in the harbor for a day, and then it was time to debark, and it was like, again, out of a movie. We went over the side of the ship on rope ladders with all our gear onto a landing craft, scared to death, and got to the beach. The landing craft flap goes down, and the first guy off tripped. We all thought he'd been shot.
He tripped?
Yeah. And we're going, really? I mean, even the officers were like,
They didn't debrief you on anything.
No one knew
really
anything. So anyway, we get off the landing crafts. We march up this hill, and at the top of the hill, and this is the insanity of war. At the top of the hill was a PX truck selling hamburgers and Cokes. You know, and of course, no one had any money.
Selling?
It was like just before we left for Vietnam. The Red Cross was there selling donuts and coffee. It made me crazy. I have never donated to the Red Cross since. So anyway, that's how I got to Vietnam. I spent 14 months there. I was with a 105 howitzer unit, and we were settled on a hill, LZ Sharon, up north on near the DMZ. We didn't know it, but we were 105 support for a number of things, first cab units, the Quezon battle.
So they don't tell you the context. They just say,
Just
what
do your
say?
job.
Okay, just do your job. And your job was?
FDC, and I was lucky. I knew how to read and I knew how to write, so I got to do more of a battalion clerk job, which was fine with me. So yeah, because the colonel walked by one day, and I was reading the New Yorker, and he goes, "What's that?" I said, "The New Yorker." And he said, "Well, what are you doing with it?" I said, "I'm reading it." He goes, "You read the New Yorker?" I said, "Yes, I do." So he told the first sergeant, "That one, I want him working for me." So yeah, I mean,
What did you feel about the integrity of the higher ups? Did you feel that they were doing their job? Did you feel like they were jerks, or what was?
Oh, some of them were okay. I mean, you're in a situation where you really don't know what's going on around you. You'll never really know what's going on around you, and some were jerks. We had a major, a battalion XO, Major Whitaker, and he was the kind of guy that no matter, I mean, here you are in the middle of a war, and this guy, every time he walked by, he expected you to stop what you were doing, stand up and salute him. And one day, he walked by, and of course, everyone stood up except me and saluted, and he said, "Schinsky, why, an officer just walked by. Why didn't you stand up and salute?" I said, "Major Whitaker, if I stood up and saluted every time you walked by, I'd never get my job done." So about 3 minutes later, my first sergeant came over. He said, "Schinsky, just play the game. We know it's a bunch of BS, but just play the game." He said,
Did you take that?
Huh?
Did you take that advice along with you through the rest of your?
Every now and then. But usually I don't. I don't tolerate BS well.
How did you come to the Coachella Valley?
Well, I was in Charlotte and
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina, after Atlanta, and I had started a contemporary art center with a friend of mine, and she died in an auto crash. And my father dropped dead. My mother wasn't well, so it was kind of time to come home.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner grew up in the Coachella Valley. So we said, well, where are we going to move to? And I said, well, why don't we go to the desert? And he said, really? I know. And his sister and brother were here. So, yeah, this is where we came back. And that was 2003. So,
Where did you live when you first came back to the...
La Quinta.
Mm-hmm.
La Quinta.
Do you and or your partner have relatives in the desert?
He does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his sister's still here. His brother died, unfortunately. He has a nephew. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you know, his parents had died.
When you first came here, what was the desert like for you when you first came here? You really hadn't lived here before yourself, so what was it like?
I hadn't lived here. Well, it was magic. You know, I mean, we used to come out here in the 70s to visit his family. 'Cause, you know, God, we've been together going on 49 years. But yeah, we used to come out and because he grew up in Coachella. His stepdad was mayor of Coachella, Lebanese guy.
What was his name? You know,
Nick Abdelnour.
Mm-hmm.
He had Plaza Market, Begduma Park in Coachella.
Mm-hmm.
Nick gave the city the land for the park. And you know, we used to come out and visit, and the desert was magic. There was nothing here. You know, obviously there were things here, but it was still wide open. It was quite lovely.
There were orchards, or there were
orchards. There, you know, the housing was here, but not to the extent that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
There was wide open space from one end of the valley to the other.
Where did you go shopping? Let's say, where did you go shopping for, like, groceries, for example?
Where did we go? Stater Brothers, you know.
So they had Stater Brothers then,
They did.
in La Quinta, right?
In La Quinta.
Mm-hmm.
But
so what were you doing? What was your occupation when you first came here? Or the first
arts administration.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've been in that since I graduated from graduate school.
Did you have an actual job of that? I mean, where you were, you know?
Well, I went from graduate school to my first real paid job was to manage the Ruth S. Schaffner Gallery in Los Angeles, down on Melrose.
Melrose and
La Brea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was right there. Right, my maison was next door to us.
Amazing.
Oh gosh, the big print facility. What was it called? Where all the artists would go to print, make prints. I can't remember.
Well, what did you do with that?
I helped organize the exhibitions, kept the place in order, and
What kind of art was it?
contemporary, very contemporary. Ruth was a German immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
and had one of the best eyes of any person I had ever met. She was remarkable, and I think I learned more from her in the time I worked from her than the entire time I was in school.
It was a small gallery, relatively small.
Very small gallery, yeah. It was relatively small, but she just had really interesting artists from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
She passed away now.
she moved when I went to Atlanta. She closed the gallery and moved to Nairobi. she had involved herself with his name was Adam from Kenya. Didn't speak a word of English, and every time you'd see him, oh, hello, nice to meet you. That's all he knew how to say. Hello, nice to meet you. And yeah, she had been married what, 5 or 7 times. And her last husband was Joe Schaffner of Hart, Schaffner and Marx. And the way she described it is that she met Joe Schaffner when she was a very young girl, and before she could get him.
Cute. That's hysterical.
She was fabulous. I just loved that woman.
What was it, one thing that she taught you that you really took, you never forgot, and you've used for years? One kernel of wisdom. Mm-hmm.
Well, I've always been a good listener,
Mm-hmm.
but she reinforced that. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
Always listen. Don't feel like you have to say something. Just listen. And if you have something to say, fine. But listen and learn how to see. She taught me how to see. Not just look, but to see. And there's a difference between the two.
Absolutely. Since you've been here, have there been well, let's start with an earlier historical event that happened. Do you remember anything like some kind of celebration in the desert that happened, or an earthquake or a flood? We'll go.
Well, no, I mean, the big earthquake I was not here for. No. Well, we had a few decent earthquakes since I've lived here. But otherwise, no, it's just, I think the only major thing that has really happened since I've been here is that the place has just popped. It has grown so much. And unfortunately has become like everywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's no longer unique, which is very sad. Because I remember when we used to come out here in the 70s, Magnans was still on Palm Canyon. Bullock's was, it was still Palm Springs. Mm-hmm. Now it's Palm Tourist.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the activities that you did when you were here? You were a runner.
I'm a runner.
Mm-hmm.
Always have been. Still doing it after 50 some years. Yeah. So that's mostly what I do. I run, I do weights, and I do Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
So
how often?
Every day.
What time do you get to the gym?
5 a.m. when they open. Yeah.
You take a day off there?
I usually take weekends off just to rest my weary bones. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I still run on the weekends. I run 6 days a week. Yeah.
How did you come to start the Coachella Valley Arts Center?
Well, I was involved with an organization because I needed something to do when we moved here, and for a while I was a substitute teacher, and I did a one-on-one with a boy with a challenge boy, which was a very gratifying thing to do. I had him from the 6th grade through the 8th grade, because I was the only one that ever paid attention to how he learned. And once I discovered that, I got him through middle school. He was failing everything when I got him, and he was the product of a cocaine addict mother, and his brain didn't work like everybody else. He was very bright, and he couldn't translate from his brain to his fingers to write it down, but he could verbalize nicely. And one really wonderful moment was he had an assignment to write a poem. I think it was 6th grade, and we spent almost an hour trying to get something on paper, and it just wasn't happening. So he was getting frustrated. And when he got frustrated, he would shut down very easily. So I said, "Okay, Kyle, go over on the computer and do whatever you want to do, you know. So he went on. He was fascinated by weather. So he went right to weather.com, and he was sitting there and he was looking at storms and storm clouds, and he said, "Mr. Schinsky, come look at this." And he was describing these storm clouds in really, really quite beautiful words. And I thought, so I said, let me finish up with what I'm doing. Describe them to me. So he would start describing these clouds. And as he described, I just wrote it down. And then, of course, the bell rang, and he panicked because he didn't have a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Kyle, calm down. You've got your poem." "No, I don't. No, I don't. I didn't write anything down." I said, "Kyle, no, you didn't write it down. I wrote it down. Because your descriptions of the clouds were so beautiful. I just wrote that down."
Oh.
I said, "So you've got not only one poem, you've got 3 poems." No, the teacher won't accept them." I said, "Let's go find out." So we walked to the classroom, and we walked in, and Mrs. I forget what her name was, and I said, Kyle has something to ask you." Because I had told him prior to leaving our session, I said, "Kyle, you don't have to write the poem down. A poem comes from your head and your heart. And if someone else writes it down for you, that's okay." No, Mrs. Ryan won't accept this." So we got to the classroom. She's standing at the door, as teachers always do at the 6th grade. "Hello, kids." And we walked in. He said, "You ask her." I said, "No, this is your assignment. You ask her." "Mrs. Ryan." "Yes, Kyle." "Mr. Schinsky wrote my poems for me. Is that okay?" And she goes, "Well, no. They're supposed to be yours, Kyle." I said, No, Kyle, explain to Mrs. Ryan what I wrote." And he explained it to her in the best terms he could. And she looked at me and she said, "Well, Kyle, of course that's all right. Because you know, poems come from your head and your heart." From that day on, that's how we functioned. I would scribe for him. Because I reported that to his IEP person and the principal. And so we got permission, and that's how he tested. I would scribe.
Oh.
And I got him through school. Yeah. So, yeah,
That's wonderful.
it was one of the best things I've ever done as a human being. The other one was in Vietnam.
You want to say about that?
Sure. I mean, there was a guy in another battery, and he came in one day and he goes, "Hey, Schinsky." "Yeah." He goes, "I've been kind of watching you." "Yeah." He goes, "You're kind of a straight-up guy. Would you do me a really big favor?" I said, "I guess. What is it?" He goes, "Would you write my mother a letter?" I said, "I don't know your mother." And he goes, No. And he was getting very nervous. I said, "You want me to be your scribe?" He said, "What's that?" I said, "You tell me the words, I write them down." He goes, "Yeah." He said, "You can't tell anyone this, but I don't know how to write." I said, "Sure." So, and our agreement was he came in every week. I would scribe for him. And he said, "I want to be your friend." I said, "That's fine. This is the relationship we will have." And so, after the first letter, though, his mother wrote back. You could practically see the tears on the paper. So, yeah.
That's a good one, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I'll never forget it. To do something so meaningful.
Yeah.
So, for somebody else.
I know you from other situations as well. Like, for example, when you were a mentor at Cathedral City High. I know you from that, too.
Yeah.
How long were you a volunteer there?
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was called a mentor.
You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of help the kids through and
mm-hmm.
kind of guide them along and
Mm-hmm.
give advice when needed,
mm-hmm.
or even when not needed.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, that's been my career, is, helping people find the opportunities.
Mm.
I mean, that's what I do still. I give artists opportunities to do things they normally never would be able to do.
How did you find that location in India with the CVAC?
Well, I wrote every city in the valley a letter saying who we were. We're a nonprofit organization. We're looking for a space because there's a need for studios in the valley at reasonable rental prices. Blah blah blah. And nobody answered me. So I sent the letter out again, and the only city that kind of hinted they were interested was Indio. So I went down, and there was a space. I looked at it, took it over, and spent 18 months, about 18 months, cleaning it up and trying to make it ready for something. And the city engineers came in and said, "Oh, structurally unsound. Get out of here." So I was taking a walk downtown, and there was another building open. There was the roll-up door of the building was open. I walked in, walked around. I thought, "Oh, this is perfect." And at the time, it was being used as an upholstery house.
Mm-hmm.
But
was it owned by the city?
The building is still owned by the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I walked over to City Hall and saw the city manager, and he looked at me. And I said, "I found the place." He goes, "I think I know where it is." So yeah, and of course the upholstery people weren't real happy, but I didn't know it at the time. But they had been kind of using the building because they had friends on city council, so they had a sweet deal, but they had to move.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2011. Been there ever since.
So you've been in this location, which is at
45140 Town Street.
So what did you do to start? I mean, it's pretty well established now. Where did you start in the building? Where did you start doing things?
Oh, God. First thing I ever did was sweep the whole place out. And once I got it to at least some semblance of order, there was one artist who I knew, Patrick Blythe, glass artist, and I hadn't heard from him for a couple of years because I'm the curator for the Rancho Mirage annual celebration of the arts, and Patrick was in it one year and was the best of show, and I liked him. I liked his work, so I contacted him, and he came down. He looked around. He goes, "Whoa, this place has great potential." So he was the first artist to take his space, and he was with me up until 6 years ago when he unfortunately died. But he was the energy that I worked off of.
He was an amazing person.
He was remarkable, smart, talented. He was a finance guy. So when he retired, he wanted to do what he wanted to do. And and then he started off with one, and now I've got 20 artists working in the building. What is your, I would say not mission, but your definition of how you are at the moment? How do you define the space at the moment? At the moment, well, it's a place where art is made. That's what's important. Could you mention the different disciplines? Oh gosh, I've got a jewelry maker. I've got a guy that works in foam and covers it with stucco. I've got a number of painters in oil painting, acrylic painting. I've got a lady that does found objects. I've got Leslie Roth, who does found objects with a twist. And we've got glass, fused glass and glass blowing. And I've got metal, welding, metal sculpture. I've got a guy that's making furniture using wood and metal. yeah, it's a variety of things, which was very important for me. I mean, that was done purposefully to have a different combination of disciplines, because that's where the energy comes from. And the building does have good energy.
I know you have programs for veterans.
We do. Yep.
Could you say a little bit about that?
The first veteran program I did was 5 different disciplines, a week each discipline, and I gave a presentation to a local group and mentioned that we had done this for high school kids. We had like 5 different disciplines, a week per discipline, and I mentioned that in my presentation that I would really like to do this for vets. And afterwards, one of the people in the group, a gentleman in the group, contacted me and said, how much was that high school program? How much was the bill for that? I told him. I said it was about 12 grand. He said, well, how much for the vets? I said, probably about the same. And he said, okay, I'll fund it. So he funded it. He started at 12, and then he called me one day. He said, you need a little more for PR, so he gave me another 3 grand. And so we did the same program for veterans. We did glass, we did printmaking, painting, drawing, glass blowing. It was good because I had guys who had never done anything like this before, and guys who had never met each other either. And I had vets from Vietnam, I had vets from Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah, it was a good program, and we'll be periodically doing that again. But I also try to do exhibitions of artists who are also veterans.
What about, there's a recent one with a young artist who got a grant for that sort of focuses on young people, I'd say. Yeah, I'm talking about Alex.
Oh, Alex, Adriana Lopez Espina.
Yeah.
Yeah, she applied for and received a very nice grant from the state to do a series of workshops for younger people. And we're in the kind of process of planning that out now. But prior, in the last 2 weeks, we did fused glass, ceramics, and Alex did a wire and wool sculpture workshop, and that was funded by the Red Auerbach Youth Foundation. I try to, if I receive funding from someone, I don't charge for these workshops for the participants. That's one of the major things that makes us different from everyone else in this valley, is that if the workshop is paid for, I would be very remiss to charge for it.
Right.
I mean, that's a sin. So
like the Red Cross.
Like the Red Cross. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like if I have materials donated to me, I don't sell them to people to use. They're there, use them. I got them for nothing. You should get them for nothing. Yeah, it really is my hackles go up when these places charge $25 a day or $250 a week. You know, a lot of these people can't afford it. And if you're getting funding from an outside foundation or private individual, you should not be charging somebody else. So,
how has the desert, since you've moved here, how has the desert improved or not? You can just say with the improved. But
improved.
I think it has. More interesting people.
Well, there are interesting people. There are interesting people here. However, they're all in their own silos. You know, you may know about them, but they never venture out. You know, very, very seldom do I have people from anywhere else coming into the art center in Indio. I mean, it's like almost unheard of. You know, India. You know, people don't travel 5 miles because they're so afraid to leave their compounds.
It's true. How about since the pandemic?
And the pandemic, yeah, it did change the world, but I think a lot, people are just using it as an excuse. Continue to use it as an excuse.
What about Coachella? The Coachella Music Festival,
Doesn't affect me at all. In the last, since 2011, since I've been in the building I'm in, I think I can count on one hand the number of people that came in while they were here for the festival.
Mm-hmm.
People come to Coachella, they go to the thing, then they go back to Palm Springs.
But they do have some activities in the city now related to, like once a month they'll have musical activities.
Yeah, it's not related to Coachella.
Oh, it isn't, okay.
No, during Coachella they do one musical activity. But otherwise, Indio is like 40 years behind every other city in this valley. They don't have much vision or courage to do different. And everyone else in this valley has built an amphitheater. Indio's now building a performance space.
Where's that, by the way?
Right, catty corner for me.
Oh, okay.
They're very reluctant to do anything that is not tried and true. They love to be safe. They love to be beige.
What's your vision going forward with CVAC? Do you have a vision, or you just take it week by week, or?
I take it year by year, month by month. I don't like long-range planning because if something exciting comes up that's available, do it. If I can fit it in, just do it. I don't like, I can't do that because my calendar. No.
I agree.
So
be spontaneous. It allows you to be
spontaneity. Yeah. I mean, 2024 is going to be one of the first years that I have actually had more than one exhibit planned. Only because people have come to me with good ideas about doing something. So,
tell me about your judging of. You were a judge in various scholarship programs, or and also art.
Oh, sure. I mean, I've been a reader for different scholarship programs. While I was on the board of the Carry On Foundation, I was one of the readers, and interviewers for scholarships. And I'm a member of Indio Rotary. We did that again last year for high school students, seniors at Shadow Hills High, giving scholarships. And it's been, for the second year I was asked to read applications from organizations through Mid-America Arts Alliance, which is headquartered in Kansas City. So I had about, 44 applications to read of different programs they were asking for funding for. I've done it for, California Arts Council. I sat on National Endowment of the Arts panels. Been doing it a long time.
What do you look for when you're in those capacity where you're looking at someone's lifetime and you're thinking about their present and then their future? What do you look for?
Organizationally, I look for originality. I always tend to go for the applications that seem sincere, that seem like, oh, this is a little different take on, because there's really not much that's different these days, but you can always find a different way to go to attack it. And you can tell by the language used if they're sincere or not. I mean, the grant writing, there's jargon people use, it's like, puts you to sleep. But every now and then, oh, all right. And of course their visuals always have a lot to do. And I always check out their websites to see if indeed they're telling the truth.
Do they usually have their own website? Or?
Usually, yeah. And the same thing with individuals. It's the quality of work with the individuals. That's what's important to me. Are you doing good work? And that, I mean, if you're asking for funding for to do more work, then you better be making good work now.
Mm-hmm. How does a young person do good work? How do you know they're doing good work? Because they're doing a lot of it, or
Not necessarily quantity. Good work to me is honest work, work that speaks of the individual making it, that is not like everybody else, that the person making it has enough self-awareness and courage to do what they really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of young artists out here, but they're all doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And every now and then, though, one will just rise to the top because they may be doing similar things subject-wise, but there's a twist to it, a different take on it, their individual creativity's coming through on it, and it speaks very loudly. Yeah.
What is your advice for a young person coming up that feels they have strong art ability? What is your advice to them?
Don't copy.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you feel comfortable with. Be true to yourself. Yeah. Don't worry about what other people say. Mm-hmm. Just do what you feel comfortable doing. And I learned that. I mean, I've always felt that and thought that, but I was very lucky once. I was in New York on business, and I had the opportunity to stay in a loft in Chinatown that happened to belong to Sol LeWitt, who was, in art historical terms, one of the most important artists of the conceptual and minimalist movement. And I happened to have an opportunity to stay at his loft, which was remarkable because it was him through and through. Anyway, I got there on Friday night because he was in Europe, and Saturday morning I got up, standing in the kitchen. I was making coffee, standing in my underwear, and I felt this present. You know how you feel if you know there's someone in the room with you? I turned around and there was Sol LeWitt in his underwear. I jumped, and he goes, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. He said, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but I got in from Europe early, and I didn't want to drive to Connecticut, so I just kind of slept on the couch. And he goes, but God, man, what kind of coffee you make? And that's what woke me up. And he apologized again I said, there's no reason to apologize to me. I said, this is your life. I'm just here to staying here. And so he goes, well, finish the coffee. So I finished the coffee. We sat down in our underwear, and I listened for about an hour of him talking. And his advice to me was, be true to yourself. Do what makes you happy. Don't worry about what anyone else says. If you feel it's right, it's right. If you feel it's wrong, don't do it. Just do it. And that stuck with me forever. And then about a year ago, I was reading the letters that he and Eva Hess wrote between them, because she was very young. And what he said in his letters to her was almost exactly, if not the exact same thing he said to me.
Wow. Just
be true to yourself. Don't worry about what other people say or think. Do what you need to do. Yeah, that's the best advice I've ever heard and received, and the best advice I could ever give. Be true to yourself. Do what makes you happy.